What if everything you've been told about the American economy in 2026 is a carefully polished lie? I'm not talking conspiracy theories here. I'm talking about something way more mundane and way more dangerous. The gap between what the numbers say and what the numbers mean. So February 5th drops, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics releases the JOLTS report for December 2025. Job openings fell to 6.5 million, lowest since September 2020. The headlines: labor market normalizing, soft landing achieved. Cool, great. Except when you actually pull apart the data, what you find is an economy that's not landing softly. It's hovering in place, burning fuel, with nowhere to go. Let me walk you through what's actually happening. First, the basic math everyone's ignoring. You've got 6.5 million job openings. You've got 7.5 million unemployed people. That's a deficit of 1 million jobs. Think about that for a second. For the first time since 2017, outside of the pandemic chaos, there are literally more people looking for work than there are jobs available. But here's where it gets weird. Unemployment's only at 4.4%. Not terrible, right? Except that number's hiding something massive. The unemployment rate measures people actively looking for work. It doesn't measure the people who stop looking. It doesn't measure the guy who wanted full-time but took part-time. It doesn't measure the recent grad who's freelancing because nobody's hiring. And here's the kicker. Layoffs are historically low, just 1.1%. Companies aren't firing people. They're just not hiring. It's what economists are calling the low-hire, low-fire equilibrium, which is a fancy way of saying the economy's stuck in neutral. I spent 2 days cross-referencing this with Federal Reserve data, and here's what doesn't add up. GDP growth in Q3 2025? Fastest pace in 2 years. So we're supposedly growing at a healthy clip, but nobody's hiring. How does that work? How do you expand output without expanding your workforce? The official answer is productivity. That magical word that economists throw around when the numbers stop making sense. And sure, maybe there's some truth to it. But let me show you what I think is really going on. 3 things converged in 2025 that nobody's connecting. Number 1, tariffs. Not the old school 2-3% tariffs. We're talking an average static rate of 16.5% by the end of 2025. They called it Liberation Day policy. Catchy name for what's essentially a massive tax on imports. And before you jump in with, but tariffs protect American jobs, let me tell you what actually happened. Companies froze. They didn't know if costs were going up 10% or 30%. They didn't know which countries would retaliate. They didn't know if supply chains would collapse. So they stopped expanding. Professional and business services, down 257,000 openings. Retail, down 195,000. Even healthcare, the sector that's supposed to be recession-proof, dropped 152,000 openings. But they didn't lay people off. Why? Because they remembered 2021. They remember scrambling to hire, offering signing bonuses, losing talent to competitors. So instead of firing during uncertainty, they're hoarding, keeping the people they have. Number 2, immigration crackdown. And this is where the data gets really uncomfortable. Certain sectors, construction, agriculture, hospitality, they're not seeing job openings collapse because demand disappeared. They're seeing openings collapse because the labor pool literally shrunk. Fewer workers available means fewer positions posted. It's not that companies don't want to hire, it's that they can't find anyone. So you get this bizarre paradox. Overall job openings crash, but in specific industries, the shortage is actually getting worse. And the BLS data doesn't distinguish between we're not hiring because business is slow and we can't find workers because policy changed the supply. Number 3, and this is the one that keeps me up at night, AI displacement. Now, I'm not one of those robots are taking all the jobs people, but something changed in 2025. Goldman Sachs quietly published estimates suggesting AI adoption started meaningfully impacting entry-level and office support roles, not replacing entire departments, just making them more efficient. One person doing the work of two, which brings us back to that GDP jobs disconnect. If companies can maintain or grow output with fewer people, thanks to software, automation, whatever you want to call it, then yeah, you can have economic growth without job growth. It's not a productivity miracle. It's a structural shift in how work gets done. And here's the part they aren't telling you. The quits rate. That's the percentage of people voluntarily leaving their jobs. It's stuck at 2.0%. Compare that to 2021-2022, when it was over 3%. Back then, workers had options. You didn't like your job? Fine. 3 other companies were ready to hire you tomorrow. Now, people are trapped. Not because they love their jobs, but because they're terrified of ending up in that pool of 7.5 million unemployed people chasing 6.5 million openings. The balance of power just flipped, and nobody's talking about it. Let me hit you with another uncomfortable fact. The November 2025 report was revised down by 218,000 openings. That's not a rounding error, that's a massive adjustment. And the BLS has been taking heat for this because their survey response rates are dropping. Fewer companies responding means more estimation, more modeling, more room for error. So when you see that 6.5 million number, ask yourself, is that real or is that the BLS's best guess? Do we really believe that data is accurate when gig work, contract work, and small business hiring aren't being captured properly? Now let's talk about the people defending this. Because there's a whole camp of economists saying, actually, this is fine. Their argument? The productivity miracle. They point to that GDP growth and say, look, we're producing more with less. That's not stagnation, that's efficiency. Philip Jefferson, the Fed vice chair, has been pushing this line. He's basically saying the labor market's not broken, it's evolved. And you know what? Maybe he's not entirely wrong. If AI genuinely is allowing companies to do more with fewer people, then yeah, you'd expect job openings to stay low while GDP stays healthy. That's not a crisis, that's a transformation. But here's my problem with that narrative. If productivity's skyrocketing, but wages aren't rising and hiring's frozen, then all those efficiency gains are going straight to corporate margins and shareholders. Workers aren't seeing it. The guy stuck in his job because he can't find a better one. He's not getting a productivity bonus. He's getting squeezed. There's also the demographic argument. 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. Labor force shrinking naturally. So maybe we don't need 150,000 jobs a month anymore. Maybe the new baseline is 50,000. That would mean the crisis is just us adjusting to a smaller, older workforce. Cool theory, except it doesn't explain why job openings collapsed in sectors that should still be growing. Healthcare, for example. Aging population, increased demand, yet openings are down. That's not demographics. That's something else. I looked at the Federal Reserve's stress test scenarios for 2026, and here's what's buried in there. They're modeling for a situation where GDP grows modestly, 1.8 to 2.2%, but unemployment stays elevated, not recession level, just persistently higher than it used to be. They're preparing for exactly what we're seeing now, an economy that's technically fine, but feels broken to everyone living in it. The Fed's currently holding rates at 3.5 to 3.75%, and they're in no rush to cut. Why? Because inflation's still around 3%. They'd rather keep things tight and let the labor market cool than risk prices spiraling again. Which means if you're waiting for rate cuts to juice hiring, don't hold your breath. Meanwhile, corporations are loving this. Lower wage pressure, workers too scared to leave, borrowing costs high enough to discourage competitors from expanding. If you're a big, established company with cash reserves, this environment is perfect. You're not growing fast, but you're not being disrupted either. It's the small businesses and startups that are getting crushed. They can't afford to hire at current wage levels. They can't borrow cheaply to expand. And they can't compete with automation investments the big guys are making. Here's what I think happens next. Scenario 1, the optimistic take. AI productivity gains eventually trickle down. Companies start expanding again because the efficiency improvements make growth cheaper. Wages rise because output per worker is higher. The labor market rebalances at a higher productivity level, and everyone's better off. Scenario 2, the stagnation trap. We stay in this low hire, low fire equilibrium for years. GDP grows slowly. Unemployment hovers around 4.5%. But dynamism dies. Fewer people switching jobs means less innovation. Fewer startups forming means less creative destruction. The economy becomes a zombie, technically alive, but not really moving. Scenario 3, the break. Something gives. Either inflation spikes again and the Fed has to hike, tipping us into recession, or tariffs escalate into a full trade war and supply chains genuinely collapse, or unemployment starts climbing faster than expected and the low fire part of the equation breaks down. Companies that were hoarding workers suddenly can't afford them anymore. I don't know which one we're heading toward, but I know the data we're being fed right now doesn't tell the full story. When job openings are at 5-year lows, but GDP's growing, someone's benefiting and someone's getting left behind. And the headlines aren't interested in distinguishing between the two. One more thing before I wrap this up. The SOM rule. It's this recession indicator based on unemployment rate increases. If the 3-month average unemployment rate rises more than half a percentage point above its low, historically, you're in or about to enter a recession. We've gone from 3.4% to 4.4%. That's a full point. The SOM rule should be flashing red, but it's not being treated that way because the increase isn't coming from layoffs. It's coming from more people entering the labor force and not finding work. Same end result, higher unemployment, but a different cause. So the question is, does that difference matter? Or are we just redefining what a recession looks like so we don't have to call it one? I dug through the Indeed Hiring Lab's 2026 forecast, and their language is fascinating. They keep using the word stability, as if flatlined hiring is the same thing as stable prosperity. It's not. Stability without mobility is stagnation, and stagnation without disruption is decay. Look, I'm not trying to be doom and gloom here. I'm just saying the story we're being sold doesn't match the mechanics underneath. You can't have record productivity gains and wage growth stalling at the same time, unless the gains are being captured by a very specific group of people. You can't have GDP growth and hiring freezes unless the nature of work itself is fundamentally changing. And you can't have an unemployment rate that looks fine when 1 million more people are chasing jobs than there are jobs available. The economy is not crashing, but it's not healthy either. It's running on fumes, calling it efficiency, and hoping nobody notices that the engine's not actually turning over. So, here's the question I'll leave you with. If the economy is doing great, why does it feel like nobody's hiring?